Hey, mountain climbers, welcome to a inspiring and encouraging episode featuring my friend Ben Cooper. I became acquainted with Ben at the Ohio Christian Writers Conference this past November, but it wasn't until a couple months later that we really got to know each other when Ben encouraged me to share my story on PJNet with Coach Mark. You see, Ben knew that we had something in common. We both know what it's like to face the mountain of sickness. So if you know Ben, you know he's passionate about nature and his bees. But what you might not know about him is that he is a two-time cancer survivor. And he actually just celebrated a huge anniversary as a cancer survivor. And I'm just so honored that he chose to come on Mountain Climbers to allow us to celebrate with him. So let's head over to Zoom and hear Ben's remarkable story of how God took him from scary unknowns to mountaintop victories. Hey Ben, thank you for being on Mountain Climbers. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Well,
Glad
I appreciate you being on here because I know some of what you might talk about is difficult to remember, but I know that it's going to help others and inspire them to keep on climbing. So thank you for this sacrifice that you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank
Um,
you for asking.
but you know what? We're just going to get the introductions right out of the way because, people might not know where you're from or your family. So share a little bit about yourself and your family, where you're from, all that information.
I currently live, the easiest way to explain is I live in the foothills of the Eastern Continental Divide.
Mm-hmm.
If you would put a pin in Pittsburgh and another pin in Washington, D.C., and find the halfway point right on the Maryland-Pennsylvania line, that's where I live.
Okay.
I look out my back window and I get to see about 1,000 acres of woods. And so it's nice, it's picturesque, it's mountainous,
Mm-hmm.
um, and kind of close to a lot of things. Within 2 hours, I could be to Pittsburgh or to Washington, D.C. So just far enough away, but close enough that it
Yeah.
works. But I'm a transplant here. I grew up north of Pittsburgh
Okay.
uh, in Beaver County, right next to the Ohio line.
Okay.
And, grew up on a dairy farm, a multi generational family farm, dairy farm, and uh, just started, just grew up loving animals.
Mm-hmm.
Went off to Penn State, got a ag science degree,
Mm-hmm.
and then worked 32 years for Maryland Department of Agriculture,
Okay.
and retired November 19, 8, 2018.
Okay. Now you are married and have 5 kids, right?
I do. I have 5 kids. My wife and I will soon be celebrating our 32nd anniversary.
Well, congratulations
Um,
on that.
and and we have kids that are range from 18 to 28 years old.
Okay. That's awesome. Do you have grandkids?
No, no
Not,
grandkids yet.
not yet. Well, hopefully it will happen for you soon. Um, so next question, I want you to tell a little bit about your salvation story. Actually, I want you to tell it in detail because I really think that laid the foundation for you to get through what you have been through. And so I want the viewers to understand that.
Okay. I'm gonna make a guess here, Whitney, that I probably fall similar to you, that even before I was born, I was in church.
Yeah, you are
Um,
right. That's a good guess. That's correct.
Probably while I know while I was still in my mom's womb, church has been part of my life even before I hit the ground. So um, there's only a few times, probably due to sickness
Yeah.
or whatever, that I wasn't in church. But that doesn't mean that I'm saved and that I'm a Christian, as hopefully most people know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started going to a summer camp. Our family started going to a family camp that is not that very far from me. It's actually halfway between here and Pittsburgh, and it's in the mountains in Uniontown. And I was 6 years old when I went. this will be 52 years this summer that I've been going and part of that camp. But at 12 years old, my family quit going,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to continue to go.
Yeah.
And it just was a special place for me.
Mm-hmm.
And at 12 years old, I felt a lot of things happened
Yeah.
even before and during that week at church camp. And a group came in and they basically had a call for salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sunday school teacher that we had during that week
Yeah.
also really did some visual things that told us of our sin. You know, how bad can a 12-year-old be? Still bad enough to need salvation.
Exactly.
You know, not enough that you did some really bad things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my life is free from drugs and some of the really heinous things, but according to God's word, just being born in sin is heinous enough to make me a sinner, to make me separated from God. Felt the need and call, and so I really was impacted and have been involved in leadership with that camp and other camps to the point where in 1996, for 4 years, I went out of the country and helped with camps in the Caribbean.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so camping ministry is kind of near and dear to my heart because I can see that it really challenges children of all ages. So still involved with it and still do some speaking with camp ministry.
That is so great, and that all of that probably gave you the strength when this unbelievable curveball came your way. You know, I want to know, what were the signs that told you that something wasn't right in your body, and did cancer ever enter your mind?
You know, unfortunately, it did. Back in the 70s when I was going through junior high and high school, I didn't know what the signs of the zodiac were or what they even meant. But you know what? I was born on July 1st.
Uh-huh.
And when you look up your sign, I'm under the sign of Cancer. And I thought, I mean, even at a young age, I thought, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I'm going to get cancer someday.
Oh,
you
wow.
know, and that isn't how the signs of the zodiac work.
Yeah.
But yet, it was something that probably put a little bit of fear in me that
the
you know,
enemy even used.
Right. You know, why in the world did they come up with it? Who would ever want to be born if you had a choice under the sign of Cancer? You know, so life went on, and marriage and children, and it was right after the birth of our youngest child. She came on the scene the last day of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was almost the last minute of the last day of the year. The hospital actually says, well, can you wait? You can be the New Year's baby. My wife said, no, I don't want to wait for that. But just shortly after our youngest, Susanna, was born, I've always had sinus problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I would wake up in the morning and I would blow my nose, and a small little blood clot would come out of this nose.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, that's kind of insignificant.
Yeah.
But yet it happened every day. It didn't used to, but every day it happened, every day. Oddly enough, the ear, nose, and throat doctor that I currently have, we actually were on a friend basis.
Okay.
That part of my job working for Department of Agriculture, I was able to help him, and he had some interesting agricultural ventures. He has a horticulture background and went to become an ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Okay.
And I called him up. He's one of these doctors that you have to wait months in order to see. And I called up and I said, can I get an appointment? Well, if you've never seen him before, it's going to take a while.
Mhm.
And I just left him. I said, well, if you can, let Brian know that I called. That's all I said. And I used his first name because that's how I talked to him.
Yeah, yeah.
And less than 24 hours later, I got a call back.
That's amazing.
And he said, what's up? And being an ear, nose, and throat doctor, I think he knew immediately whenever he looked in my sinuses that there was a problem.
Yeah.
But you don't say. And, it's kind of, you would think, well, let's go through some tests.
Mm-hmm.
He said, the imaging center is still open today. Can you go today and get a CAT scan and bring the scans back today?
That's serious when a doctor says something like that.
Yeah, let's not wait. So, I'm not trying to get anxious. I just, sure, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought the CAT scans back to the doctor, and I waited for his analysis. He didn't say anything. I still think he knew something was up.
Mm-hmm.
He said, the imaging center is closed now. If I schedule it first thing in the morning, can you stop there in the morning and have an MRI?
Oh.
Okay, we're moving pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
So I said, sure. And I went in the next morning. He said, bring the results of the MRI to me
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you're done.
Yeah.
And so I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like, if in some ways it's good it all happened at once.
Yes, that's a blessing in disguise.
Because as well as I do, Whitney, that waiting sometimes is hard.
Yeah. Yes, I do know that.
We don't like it.
No.
But we also don't like shock.
Yeah.
So I take the second set of scans, the MRIs, to the doctor. And so the next step is, he said, normally I would schedule you as an outpatient to get a biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
I do biopsies on Tuesdays. This happened to be a Friday. He said, can I take a biopsy right now?
Oh, wow.
And so,
sure. I wasn't doing anything today.
this is less than 2 days of passing. All this is happening real quick.
Yeah.
And he don't get excited because all the tests have to be sent away.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be confirmed and whatever. Yeah. He still never said the C word.
Yeah. But
he
alluded to, like, you had that ominous feeling that, yeah.
Yeah. And so he took a biopsy from my upper sinuses. I swear my eyes were probably rolling around. It's like pulling a tooth from up in your sinuses. I mean, it was painful.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And it hurt, but off to Bethesda, the sample had to be sent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I waited.
Yeah.
And waited for the results.
Well, before all this, started happening, had you been healthy your whole life?
Yeah. I remember a friend of the family, they'd say, oh, you're the picture of health. Mm-hmm. I used to run a lot of what we called back in the day 10,000 meter races. They're now 5K races, mm-hmm. 5 and 10K races. But I had all these shirts and, and involved active in all kinds of stuff, mm-hmm. And never anything that was serious.
Yeah. That is hard. So you got the results back, and obviously you heard the news. You do in fact have cancer. So when you received the diagnosis, who was with you? What was going through your head? What emotions were you experiencing?
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that because of this friend relationship I had with Dr. Brian, he called me. It was a Thursday. It was the last day of February. He called and he said, some long name of some type of cancer. Mm-hmm. He says that's what they think it is. I want you to call me first thing in the morning Friday.
Yeah.
And once he said cancer, it was just like shocked. I couldn't say anything. I was trying to process everything that he was saying. And so the next day when I called his office, I said, could you repeat what you told me last night?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm not sure that I can.
Oh, wow.
And that was between him and me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the fact that it was just as hard for him to give me that news
Yeah.
as it was for me to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife was there,
Mm-hmm.
and emotions, crying. Our
Mm-hmm.
kids were little. They were 0 to 8 years old,
Yeah.
at that time. Just a newborn to 8 years old.
Oh, yeah. That made it even tougher, I'm sure.
They don't know for sure what's going on, and why is mom and dad crying?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? And so, because he was my friend,
Mm-hmm.
when I called Friday, he had me already had he set up an appointment for me to go to Baltimore that next Tuesday.
Oh, that's amazing.
To oncologist, ear, nose, and throat oncologist at a teaching school, UMBC, and probably one of the best oncologists
Yeah.
ENTs around, and because of it being a teaching school.
Yeah.
So it just set things up. But, if you had if you'd have all these dominoes that were set up, and, I need you to come in, I need you to get a CAT scan, I need
Yeah.
you to get an MRI, I need to take a biopsy, the biopsy results come back.
Yeah.
Then the big thing is I go down and I meet a brain surgeon. Not only do I get a ENT, but oncologist, but a brain surgeon oncologist.
Throw that in there in the mix.
That was shocking to hear. A doctor that was obviously intelligent and knew what he was doing, but didn't speak real well. He mumbled and didn't have a great bedside manner.
That's always tough. Yeah.
And he explained how they were going to, I was expecting orthoscopic surgery.
Yeah.
But where my hand is, they basically removed this much of my forehead.
Oh, my goodness.
They started here and cut across the top.
Yeah.
Peeled my skin down and removed this much of my forehead.
Oh, my.
Cut my nose here, peeled it back, and went at the cancer like this.
Oh,
they cut a third of this eye socket out and bone grafted it. And internal skull base, they had to cut and bone graft that. So I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to look like?
Yeah, I can. Not only
if I survive.
Yeah, life-threatening surgery, you also have those, fears like, am I going to be distorted? When I wake up, what is going to happen? Now, so you had the surgery. What stage of cancer were you at? Was the prognosis good with this surgery?
I had a 35% survival with the surgery.
Okay.
Doing the math, that means a 65% not surviving.
That's hard to hear.
The ride back, the pastor of our church and his wife at the time drove my wife and I down to meet with the brain surgeon. There was a half hour of complete silence leaving Baltimore and getting out of the city before either of us spoke. I mean, we were just in shock.
You had to process it.
And I said, never in my life would I have ever thought I would have heard a doctor explain what he was about to do to anybody I knew, let alone myself.
Yeah.
And my wife said kind of the same thing.
Was it kind of like an out-of-body experience as you were listening?
It's like those dominoes, like the worst case scenario, each step of the way is what was unfolding.
Yeah.
But I'm glad God didn't give it to me all up front because it would have consumed me.
Oh yeah. He knows his children, and he knows how we process things and how we can make, through the situation to the top of that mountain. And he doesn't give us more than we can handle, and so I definitely thankful for that. It sounds like that's true.
I think that's why his mercies and his grace are good for a day.
Yeah, that's so true.
Here's how much you can handle today. Don't let anxiety overcome you, and let's move on to the next day.
Yeah. Exactly.
So with that 35% survival, it didn't sound good. And the experience, you're probably familiar with the organization called NORD. And so I was directed to find some answers because they couldn't answer the type of cancer, adenocarcinoma. They didn't have much information about it. They just said, we don't need to know it. We just know we need to get it out. And so when somebody gets cancer, the shock hits.
Yeah.
And you try to process it. One of the ways you try to process it is be a sponge and soak up as much information. And when there isn't any information out there, it becomes, NORD couldn't help me with much.
And that's scary.
And for those that are listening, NORD is a National Organization of Rare Diseases. And so this was a cancer that they didn't have much information about.
Yeah.
They just said, here's how we got to go about doing it. In order to improve the survival rate so that cancer doesn't return, they suggested radiation.
Yes. What was the hardest part about radiation?
It was 130 radiation treatments to my face.
Oh.
I'm going to grab something to show you. I haven't picked this up in a long time, and it may fall apart.
I love visuals. Oh, I think I know what it is. I think I know. Let's see.
It's not Halloween, but it's my mask.
I thought that's what you were going to show. Oh my goodness. I am claustrophobic. I cannot imagine having to wear that.
I'm going to put this on. It might fall, but for 6.5 weeks and 130 radiation treatments, I was bolted down to a table.
Oh my goodness.
So tight that at the end of my treatments each day, my face looked like a golf ball with all those dimples. I got to the point where I was a counter, and those that have radiation treatments understand that. You count how many numbers for the first treatment, second, because I didn't want them to go over 2 or 3 more numbers. That's getting more. I asked the doctor, I said, am I going to lose my hair? Oh, no, we have excellent machinery, and it's only going to pinpoint where it needs to go. And so they were setting up, and they have to do a mapping because the radiation had to be really close to my optic nerve.
Very precise.
Very precise. Only penetrate so far. And about 2.5 weeks into radiation, I started losing the hair in the back of my head.
Oh, wow.
And I said, why am I losing hair? I thought this was precision. They said, well, it's leakage. And I said, there's something important between here and the back of my head. But I had a circle of absolutely no hair this big at the skull base. And it affected my memory recall.
So another blow.
I could see you and know who you are, but I couldn't tell you your name. And I work with farmers in my job, and that lingered until that shelf life of that radiation was gone out of me. And it was hard. I could talk to somebody, been to their farm, know everything about their farm, but I couldn't tell them their name. Couldn't call them by name. Having that youngest child, I would go Monday through Friday. I would go leave home. It's about a 2.5-hour drive. Stay with a friend. God give me a friend that was going through some heartache, actually going through a divorce at the time, and he offered for me to stay with him. That was a comfort to him. That was a place for me.
Yeah.
and Friday I would have my treatments and drive back home. So it was driving back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And radiation has long-term ill effects.
Mm-hmm.
With chemo, you're sick right now.
Yeah.
You don't want to eat, and I had the metal mouth. They weigh you each week and make sure that you're gaining weight, not losing weight.
Yeah.
And so I kind of maintained and gained a little bit. So they were happy there, but I
Yeah.
wasn't happy with this hair loss and what
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to happen. It
Okay.
felt like I wanted to quit.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it felt like blow after blow after blow. They would say, no, that won't happen. And then, like, okay, you said it wouldn't happen. Why is this happening?
Right.
So, yeah, I can't imagine, especially with, feeling sick to begin with and having all those emotions and all that medication, it would, make you feel even more like, I just want to give up. And that would be so hard.
I wanted to quit. I wanted 2.5 weeks in. I said, it's not happening like you said it would.
Mm-hmm.
And the one nurse, and they, not all hospitals can be the same because just the sheer number of people that they push through. And I tell you, I tried to look for the silver lining as much as I could.
Yeah.
I was thankful that I was having radiation treatments in Baltimore where I didn't see any person younger than me. I don't think I could handle seeing kids or younger people. Everybody was my age or older.
Yeah.
There was a guy that was driving down just like me on Mondays and coming back home that lived probably 45 minutes, and we shared the same appointment times, and so we got to talk, and you get a new family that is going through it. But to see some people with where the radiation was, that their skin was turning red with so many treatments.
Did you burn?
I did not. They gave me some material, some ointment related stuff that said put it on after the treatment and before you go to bed, but don't put it on before the radiation because that will make you sizzle like bacon, I guess. But they wanted you to hydrate. They said since it's around here, the radiation might cause your teeth to just decompose and crumble. I'm thinking, I'm glad that didn't help. Didn't happen. And they said your dental care needs to step up way more. So I followed their drank more water than what I wanted to, and didn't have that problem, at least the facial. But I did have missing hair, part of an eyebrow, and everything that the radiation touched.
That's crazy. I mean, cancer is hard enough to hear, but then to hear all the side effects that you might get because of the treatment you have to take in order to kill the cancer, that's just like a double-edged sword, You
don't know which is going to kill you, the cancer or the treatment.
Exactly, and that's so tough, but you did start to see beauty from ashes. How long before you heard the words cancer-free?
Well, I sent you a little writing that I did 5 years after I hit cancer-free. And I set a personal goal. So anybody that has cancer, that first milestone is 5 years. You hit that 5 years, and according to their records, if I had radiation and the surgery, and made it to 5 years, pretty much they hadn't had any information of anybody getting that cancer again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So getting to 5 years was a real big milestone. I actually planned out that I wanted to get back in physical shape, that I ran a local 5K race to run it as kind of like, my, I guess, victory run or victory lap. And wasn't satisfied enough. The next year I ran because I didn't place in anything. The next year I ran and did well enough to get my name in the paper. So I felt like, I accomplished that. I beat this monster, this thing called cancer.
Yeah, that is amazing. And when you heard the words cancer-free, the first time, did it ever cross your mind, maybe my battle with cancer is not over?
Never. I thought I had it.
Mm-hmm.
I made it to 5 years cancer free, and this is good. I always knew that. You hear these stories that somebody gets cancer, they go through the treatments, survive the treatments,
Mm-hmm.
they get told they're cancer free, and 2 years later it comes back with aggression,
Yeah.
and they're dead,
Yeah.
and they're gone.
But that never crossed your mind.
Once I made it 5 years,
No.
I thought, I'm good. I can get on. And that's what my doctor said. He said, let's get this taken care of so you can get on with your life.
Yeah. But as you saw, it wasn't over. And you actually went a very long time before you got cancer again. And this time, it was a completely different cancer. So what I want to know is, was it more of a blow? Obviously, you're going to say yes, that you went so long and then got cancer again. And was it a different treatment plan? What was it, a different process, a different journey? Share about that.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. 14 years to be cancer free.
Oh my goodness, that would be crushing.
And then my PSA levels in a test got high.
Mm-hmm.
That means a concern for prostate cancer. And so the numbers started to climb. In 3 months, they started to climb really fast.
Yeah.
And so now I get to go to a urologist, and he checks me out, and more biopsies, and find out that I have had prostate cancer. It was hard because I kind of felt like I did my time.
Yeah, yeah.
I beat this, and for probably maybe a day, Whitney, I had some selfish motives.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe somebody else should take a turn. And that's really, truly being selfish.
Yeah.
Because my mental treatment for the first cancer was, I was thankful that I had cancer. I was thankful because it wasn't my wife or my kids.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to handle not being able to do anything if it was my wife or that newborn baby or that 8-year-old.
Yeah.
That would be devastating to me. What parent wouldn't say, I would take your illness in an instant? And my therapy was, I'm taking cancer and they don't have it, and that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Kind of maybe backwards thinking, but that was my therapy. Easier for me to have to deal with it than have a loved one deal with it and feel helpless.
That's natural.
Yeah. So when the second diagnosis came, for about 3 days, it was me. I was kind of self-pity.
Yeah.
Why do I have to have this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, and this will probably get into one of your other questions, that back 20 some years ago, God laid it on my heart to write a book.
Yeah.
And when that second cancer diagnosis came, 3 days after the diagnosis, I decided I'm not going to fear. I'm not going to worry. Anxiety isn't going to claim and rule me. I'm going to pick up a pen and a paper, and I'm going to write.
That's awesome. That's great. Was your prognosis good, or was it as scary as the first time?
First cancer was life-threatening. Second cancer is life-changing.
Yeah. That's an interesting outlook.
And so, and I have to say, the night before my first cancer was probably, even to this day, 18 years later, was probably the most restful night's sleep I had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have strong Christian friends from the Baltimore area. I stayed overnight with them the night before my surgery. My
Mm-hmm.
wife, my mom and dad, and my brother stayed in a hotel.
Yeah.
No, my wife stayed with me and the young and our baby, but my brother and mom and dad stayed in the hotel. And it was just calming because that family prayed for me. I had at least 12 people fasting for the next day.
That's awesome.
People praying in, I think, 5 different countries.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well,
And so all I had to do was lay down
yeah.
for surgery, lay down, even though I was bolted to a table for radiation. There's nothing I could have done to change my outcome. It was all God and using doctors and technology and things.
Yeah.
The second surgery, it was 10 and a half hours, that first cancer surgery.
Wow.
10 and a half hours. I lost 3 days of my life. I don't remember them. They're gone. Because I was out of it. Intensive care for a week.
Yeah.
The second surgery, they do so many of them at Hopkins that it's just like a manufacture machine of prostate. People come from all over the world, literally, to have. They basically wrote the book, and I wasn't really touched by humans.
Yeah.
It was all robotic.
I've been around scientists. I totally get that. Yes.
I try to use humor whenever, if something scares me a lot or if I'm fearful, I try to use humor. Right before they put me out, I knew that this robot was going to work on me. And as they rolled me into the room, I looked over and I said, "Is that the robot, the Da Vinci machine?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Not what I expected." And orderly or whoever says, "What were you expecting?" I said, "Something more like Rosie from the Jetsons." And there was no laughter on their part. They
don't get humor.
They don't believe in humor in the OR.
No.
But 36 hours, I was done and on my way home.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how quick. The thing had, I think they used 6 different arms of the robot to do the operation.
Wow.
And somebody sat at a computer screen with little feeds on their fingers, and they did the surgery and manipulated the Da Vinci machine.
Wow. That is definitely fascinating. Now, it sounds like, with how you've talked about this process, you had so many people holding your arms up, and that gave you strength. But if anyone knows you, they know you're a nature guy. They know you love your bees. So did your love for nature also help you cope with your diagnoses?
I'm a dog person as well.
Okay.
I even though dogs come and go, it's just okay. And I write in my book a quote from my dad. Eventually, one of my dogs is going to outlive me. I couldn't hold that newborn baby, but I could play with my dog and be out. My second surgery, I was back home, and a couple days later, a friend of mine that had intensive knee surgery from ACL problems in the past playing football, he was off. And so he limped, and I walked slowly, and we went out and opened up one of my beehives, and we both kind of shared in that experience of, hey, let's go look at the bees, and so that gives you some incentive to get back to life at normal pace.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you have that nature aspect, but do you remember scriptures that you clung to, or specific ways or avenues that God taught you lessons and stuff?
There's a lot of different ways going through different portions. After that hair was coming out and having to face the radiation, I really didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And, there's times of testing and trials that James tells us. But here recently, when my book came out, when I signed my book, I put Nehemiah 9:6. Probably not a very familiar verse, not one of those verses, but Nehemiah 9:6 is what I signed under my name. And it says, "You alone are the Lord. You make the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all the starry hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that are in them. You bring life to everything, and the multitudes worship and praise you." God is the author of life. From creation past to what's coming in the future, God orchestrates life and is the controller of it.
Yeah.
And so, not only nature, but us as well.
Yeah.
And so it kind of puts in place the awesomeness of God. And, I remember we just a couple of weeks ago, it was Palm Sunday, in that verse that if the people didn't cry out, the rocks would cry out.
Yeah.
So all of creation, all of everything that God, from the heavens to the earth, all of creation worship you.
Yeah.
And so
powerful stuff.
That became my, when I signed, somebody asked for an autograph for my book, Nehemiah 9:6 gets put there. Hopefully they go and look at that, because it there's more behind that story than just the book that's about nature and animals. It's more about how awesome God is.
Yeah, that's great. And those promises that God gave you during those dark times, they certainly weren't in vain, because you just received a clean bill of health, correct?
Well, I'm 4 years cancer-free, still waiting for that next
5 years.
5-year mark. The PSA numbers are not measurable. They're so low, they're not measurable.
Okay.
Once you have, anybody has cancer, they're always in remission.
Okay.
There's no guarantee that 5 years is a magic number.
Yeah.
So it's just waiting for that next 5-year cancer-free. Yes. My doctors unfortunately told me evidently my body has a hard time fighting off the free radicals. And so that just kind of leaves that door uncomfortably open.
Yeah.
That another cancer might come, but because of my age and because of my health, going through prostate cancer at an early age is much better.
Yeah.
Getting it caught and taken care of.
Yeah.
And I look at it that just like as a young middle school kid, finding out that my sign is cancer, and I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
Cancer doesn't add it. It adds years to your life, because obviously it could take you.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But the process and the way to go about it actually shortens your life. So to say I'm going to be 90 years old, mathematically probably not going to happen because of what has happened and the radiation in me. And, that I told you that the effects of radiation are long-term.
Yeah.
Ill effects. I'm having trouble reading.
Oh.
And so I just recently had my eyes examined and said, they said, your prescriptions aren't really that off. I got new glasses and I'm still having trouble reading.
Wow.
I said, I have to use a magnifying glass to read. As a writer, some people make books that the font is 0.6 or something like that. And they said, well, with these new bifocals, you should be able to see that. I can't.
Oh, man.
And so they I went back in and they tested, and I have cataracts in both eyes.
Yeah.
At 58 years old, that's a little soon, but anytime anybody has eye trauma,
yeah,
that will bring that on much earlier. So they don't want to do the surgery. They want to put it off as long as they can.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. But, in the midst of, the darkness, the mountain that you've had to climb, all those frightening unknowns, you certainly made the most of the miracles, as you would say, because God's given you more than one. And you're one busy bee, no pun intended. Well, actually, yes, that pun was intended. But share with the viewers the exciting doors that God has opened for you.
I truly believe if it wasn't for the second cancer, that book would still be in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It was therapy to force me to set aside time. I had to wait 3 months from diagnosis to surgery.
Mm-hmm.
That might as well been 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
Months to get cancer out of you is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And especially one that was kind of acting fast, faster than that it normally does, at least from the, and I think one of the things we skipped over, that first cancer, I was right on the border of stage 4.
Oh, wow.
I was at stage 3.99999. They actually took brain cells out to see if it affected my brain. Contrary to my children's beliefs, it did not. I actually saved an X-ray from my brain, just in case that ever would come up in their teen years. Hey, Dad has a brain. Here's the proof. Might be damaged. There's some hardware in there. I can feel the screws and the other pieces that are there. When you have prostate cancer, it's a whole different set of metrics. There's 3 or 4 things: your history, your DNA from your parents and grandparents are all brought into that more. And there's this whole big graph that you go through to figure out where you are. The bottom line is the cancer needed to be removed. The prostate needed to be removed.
Yeah.
So people always want to know what stage you are. And it had not invaded my lymph nodes, and that was a good thing.
Yeah, that's a miracle.
And so God opened up the door to allow me to, I could have wallowed in self-pity. I could have, 3 days was long enough. Maybe Jonah was in the whale for 3 days for a certain reason. But 3 days was long enough. And my wife says, but that's good news. It's treatable. I said, anytime a doctor says you have cancer, it's not good news.
Yeah.
But I got over it, and I said to myself, I said, nobody is given the number of days they have on this earth. Yeah. Only God knows. And so this was a wake-up call to me. I'm going to write that book. That book was meant to be written so my wife, who homeschooled all our kids, that would be kind of a science and devotional book that marriages, animals, and the Bible, and a devotion for my kids. Yeah. And the book came out when my youngest was in 11th grade. It probably never would have come out. So I used that as a launching point, a therapy point, and then God has opened that up. And as a writer, probably God can bless you a lot of different ways. Yeah. I've won some awards, but the awards pale in comparison when somebody emails you back and say, I really liked your book. It touched me in this way that helped me through a situation, or that's just what I needed at that moment. That is far more precious than hardware or whatever that could be. I call that book bling hanging on the wall. That helps to make you feel valid as a writer.
Yes, yeah.
But that's not what's important. In the challenge that Serious Writer is going through in this month, they ask you, what's your 3 main goals as a writer for 2020? My first one is to write in a way that it has everlasting or eternal value.
Yeah.
Whether it gets printed or not isn't the main goal. It's God put something in me, and maybe it took 2 cancers to get me motivated
Yeah.
to write what he wanted me to write. And I got awarded, in a way, somebody that liked the book so much that I never heard of before, took my wife and I to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and he had been there 17 times, and we got a personal tour. You can't see it in a day, but we got to see all the really cool stuff that was there.
Those are the best rewards right there.
Yeah, being asked to speak and doing, in February, I spoke 8 times in 2 different retreats.
That's awesome.
In 2.5 days.
I remember the one, you told me about it. That was really cool.
One was for 96 kids, 1st through 8th grade, and the rest were adults, mostly seniors, but mostly pastors. I had a notion to teach the same thing to the young kids, to the pastors on the same level. I thought that would be kind of interesting, but God allowed me to share. Abraham had to be called multiple times back to focus to go to the promised land. Yeah. He diverted and life got in the way. He created some of his own problems, and we do that.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes God has to get a hold of you in ways that, he's the giver of all life. He's also can take it as well. And he can shake you up and redirect you and set you back on course. And I really feel that that's what he's done. And the writing community has been an encouragement for the last year or so, that I've going to conferences and meeting some really cool people that go through the same struggles. And, you find out that most people write because of something that happened to them in their life.
That is so true. It is. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Now, tell the viewers the name of your book so they can go check it out. You haven't said it yet, so tell it.
All Nature Sings. It's a devotional guide to animals in the Bible. I did 28 animals. My kids did some of the artwork.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that legacy is there. I didn't get to write it for them for homeschool curriculum, but maybe future grandkids will get to see some artwork from their own parents.
That's great.
I've actually converted that to a children's picture book.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. That's cool.
And now I'm in that waiting period again that writers or people that have cancer hate so much, but in that waiting period that has slowed down because of the current pandemic, for trying to find an agent and a publisher.
Yeah.
I call it Created Critters. In a picture book, rhyming picture book. I already have 2 books completed, and in the series it can expand as much as God wants it to. So
yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like God has exciting things in store for you. One last thing that I want you to answer is, I believe when we climb a mountain, it's for a bigger reason than ourselves and a bigger purpose than we could ever imagine. And that's to encourage others. So what would you say to others who are facing a similar mountain that you've climbed, and how can they make it to the top?
And I shared this personally with you in the past, one of my favorite books that I read was from Warren Wiersbe. The bumps are what you climb on.
Yeah.
And our road isn't smooth. And in that book, through scripture, Warren Wiersbe tells you that you climb up these walls, these mountains, these bumps that are in our road. Yeah. You can't get around them. You can't get through them. You have to labor and crawl up on top. Once you get up on top, you have a clear view of what was behind and what's in front of you.
Yeah.
But then you have to crawl back down in the pathway again and work your way through the pathway. God has, and we envision a straight and narrow path, and it probably is, but we divert from it so many times. the bumps in the road will slow you down, just like the coronavirus slows us down. There's benefits. I think the church is growing because we're slowing down.
Yeah.
I think as an individual, we think we're young, we've got our life in front of us. I'm healthy, and then something comes that slows you down. I was off work that first cancer 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. The second was about 2.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
You don't plan for having long blocks of period where you can't do anything, and you know that just as well or more so than other people. But it's what you fill those periods with.
Yeah, that's so true.
If you fill it with going deeper and getting to know God more, you won't have a resentment feeling. You'll have a closeness with the Creator that God intended, rather than being angry.
Yeah.
One young teenager asked me when I had the first cancer diagnosis, she said, "Aren't you mad and want to shake your fist at God?" I said, "I can only raise my hand and thank Him that it wasn't my kids or my wife."
Yeah.
So our mental aspect of how we deal with it, our emotional, our spiritual, those things come in our way. God in James doesn't say, maybe some trials might come our way.
Yeah.
No, it's when they come. You're going to get them one way or another. You're going to get trials. You're not exempt. And once you become a Christian, now you're going to get more.
Yeah.
The testing is going to come to prove your true relationship with God, to prove it, and to, not that you have to prove it to Him, but as proof to others that I'm not going to, this wall, this mountain, this cancer isn't going to shake me.
Yeah. That is so true. And, I can't thank you enough for coming on Mountain Climbers and sharing your story, because your story is such a testament of where God can bring you from and the strength that He can give you. And to all my viewers, I hope that you've learned from Ben, because he's the epitome of what I say. When your strength comes from the right source, there's not a mountain you can't climb.